Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Safety Connection, taking charge of EV workplace safety. My name is Josh Payne. I'm a specialized consultant focused on machine and robotic safety here at WSPS. Most of my working experience has been in the automotive manufacturing sector, also a little bit of construction experience as well. Been with WSPS now for about 4 years. Okay. We're very excited today to talk about this topic. It's one of those areas I would say in the workplace that has become an evolving hazard. Okay. So with that, before we get into the content, we got a few housekeeping items that we do need to button up first. So one thing that we do work with the Ministry of Labor on is doing a demographics collection survey. Okay, so if you use your QR code, you can also copy and paste the link into your chat. The function number is listed on the slide. Just know this, it's a very short survey collecting demographic information on behalf of the Ministry of Labor. Okay, it's anonymous, there's no personal information collected, and the participation in the survey is optional. Okay, our goal with the survey is more or less just to ensure that we're hitting the mark and we are reaching the various demographics across the province of Ontario with our products and services that we do offer. Okay, I'll leave this up for a few moments and then we will just jump right into the housekeeping items related to Microsoft Teams. Okay, I'll leave this up for a few moments. Like I said, it is optional. 6-digit function number is on the slide. What I can do, maybe what I can do is if I pull up the PowerPoint on my end, I will drop it in the chat. So at least like the contacts for this, so that if you want to do it after the session, you can also do it there. So just give me 2 seconds and I will drop this in so we can keep rocking and rolling here. Okay. Okay. So with that, we got to go through a little bit of housekeeping items today. So again, computer audio is recommended. Okay. Um, with safety connections, we do mute and keep cameras off of all participants. That does not mean that there's not other avenues to participate in today's session. So please, at any point, use the chat box. If you got a comment, you got a question, you got some feedback, please throughout the session. If there's anything you want to add value to, you have a question, these types of things, please just drop it in the chat. Okay. On that note, we also do have a number of other functions. So we did just briefly talk about the meeting chat. So to access this, you'll see a little icon like this. If you're running the application base, it's at the top. Ribbon box there. If you are doing it on the web base, you'll have to hover your mouse, I believe, over the slide deck, and you should be able to find that icon. Okay. There's also going to be a few opportunities to submit polls. We will walk you through this as we launch the first couple here. And then finally, there are what we call reactions. So you can raise your hand, you can send a thumbs up, clapping, laughing, these types of activities. Okay. With that, you also have the ability to expand the slides. Okay, so you can make the slides go full screen if you wish. There are some directions there on the slide if you wish to complete that. Okay, so the very last housekeeping activity here. Okay. Safety Connection goals, okay? Our goal of today's session is to learn and share, discover what you value, okay? It's a great opportunity to virtually connect with industry peers. It's a great way to exchange best practices and attend from your personal workspace. The best part I really like about these Safety Connections are they're free. We have a ton of great ones on our webpage. I do encourage everyone to take a look at that. I know my friend Carl Bonnell is running one tomorrow on MLITSD ministry orders specific to pedestrian safety or struck by in the workplace. So it's definitely something to look at. We have a ton of different topics across the health and safety spectrum. Having said that, let's get into today's agenda. So we are going to get into a little bit of some introductory slides talking about the EV landscape. I'm going to talk about some potential hazards, these types of things, or sources, sorry. When we get into Module 2, that's when we're going to talk about electric vehicle hazards, the legislation that currently is in place that can apply, and also some controls, okay? I will say in preparation for today's session, many of us here at WSPS have been meeting with various stakeholders across the electric vehicle supply chain to listen to understand what are the pain points, what are the challenges, what are the opportunities for next steps. I will say that one thing, and we'll discuss this towards the end of today's presentation, is that the Ministry of Labor is actually in the process of developing an EV safety action plan through legislation that passed earlier. Later towards the end of last year, sorry, but came into effect earlier this year, working for Orca 6. We'll talk about that and exactly what the focus area of that activity initiative is. However, something that we've been proactively doing in the background is meeting with different working groups across the supply chain to ensure that we get a good grasp and landscape of where there's opportunities. Okay. Module 3, we will wrap up with resources, next steps, session wrap up. There will be an email that does go out after with all the resources that are tagged throughout this presentation. So don't feel the need to scan the QR codes, write the information down. There's going to be an email with every single QR code or resource that we do discuss in this session. Okay. So with that, let's get into the content. Okay. So introduction. Okay. So when we think about electric vehicles, I think most of us can reflect on, we're seeing a lot more and more on the road. Okay. So sales topped actually 17 million worldwide in 2024. If you actually look at the numbers, this is raising by more than 25% year over year. Okay. And if you actually look at the graph and we look at kind of the sales numbers on this standpoint, it's a very exponential graph. Okay. Meaning it had a slow growth and we're starting to see that peak. Okay. Now, as a province, we positioned ourselves to be a global leader as part of this electric vehicle supply chain. Okay. So right from the ministry's website, you can actually, if you actually clicked here, you would see that over the last 4 years, Ontario has attracted more than 46 billion in new investments, okay, from global automakers, part suppliers, manufacturers of EV batteries and battery materials, okay? So to sit here and really what we want to really think about and digest this a little bit, we're just at the tip of the iceberg as it relates to kind of the volume side of things, right? The investments are coming in, they're trickling in. The processes of establishing some manufacturing sites to repair sites, these types of things are in the process. So it's definitely going to be an emerging hazard as we move forward. And that's one of the reasons why here at WSPS, we want to try to get in front of it, as well as the Ministry of Labor has taken a heightened focus to ensure that they are providing good guidance in and around this area. Okay. So with that, we're going to use the chat to get going here. Okay, I want you to think about what are the sources of lithium-ion batteries in your workplace. Okay, let's take a couple moments. Please use the meeting chat. I do see 14 of us in this safety connection, so the more participation, the better. But just think about what are the sources of lithium-ion batteries in your workplace. What do you think? Yeah, EVs in the parking lot. Thank you. Awesome, Jamie. That goes without saying. Obviously, the vehicle side of things, okay? Computers, AGVs, yes, automatic guided vehicles for the ones that aren't familiar with these, handheld power tools, EV bikes. Honestly, me sitting at my desk right now, detectors like smoke and fire, most electronics, yes, Nadine, 100%. So even me sitting at my desk right now, I see my printer, I have an external monitor, my laptop, my cell phone somewhere in the next room plugged in because I didn't plug it in last night. The point that I'm trying to make here is, and many of you are capturing this, is that there's more lithium-ion batteries entering the workplace than we really recognize. Okay, so as much as you might not be necessarily like an EV manufacturer, there's still a lot of good information to be had as we go through this PowerPoint, okay, and this safety connection, okay? So many of you touched on these points already. So other common sources includes portable devices, cell phones, laptops, tablets, these types of things. Seeing a lot more lithium-ion battery material handling equipment. So like I've already noted, Deborah noted the AGVs as well as forklifts, very common. Many of us also noted power tools. And then finally, we're seeing a lot more of the energy storage systems, okay? Lithium-ion battery in the workplace, okay? Help with backups, these types of things, okay? Now, not going to go into too much detail on the battery basics here. But when we think about a battery, it contains an anode, cathode, and a separator. Okay. What moves the electrons back and forth is the electrolytes. Okay. That helps moves the positive, the negative to positive. Okay. And then battery management systems are required to make sure we don't get overheating. Okay. And to ensure the balancing of voltage and currents amongst the cells. We're going to talk about battery management systems and some of the faults in the manufacturing process, as well as some issues that we've seen. So just keep that in mind. Just again, an overview slide here. Okay, dive in a little bit deeper on the overview. So a single unit device which converts the chemical energy into electrical energy, that is a lithium-ion battery cell. Okay, a collection of cells in a series or a parallel is considered a battery module. Okay. Then a series of individual modules and the protection of systems organized in the shape that it will be installed in a vehicle or a product is considered a battery pack. Okay. So going to jump into our first poll question here. Okay. Just launching it for you. A collection of cells in series or parallel is lithium-ion battery cell, battery module, battery cell. Okay. Once you submit your vote, you will have to close the poll in the top right corner on your own. Okay. Give it a few moments. I do appreciate the 2 people that have already answered the question. Give you a few moments here. We'll take it up and move forward. Okay. Got 6 answers right now. Awesome. Love the participation, folks. Okay. Well, you guys are a pretty smart group here. You got it correct. Okay. So that is a battery module. Okay. Again, in an hour presentation here, we don't go into too much detail. This is where we're going to spend most of today's conversation in around BEV hazards, legislation, and controls. Okay. So let's go into this off the top here. And this is more of a title slide for everyone here. Is some of the main hazards that generally we've been coming across in our conversations across the supply chain has really buckled or been grouped into one of these main buckets. Thermal runaway, I would say, is probably one of the most common concerns. So we're going to spend some time talking about what thermal runaway is, what are the signs and symptoms, think about response plannings, these types of things. Okay. By and large, when we think about battery storage systems just in general, it's a chemical process. One conversation I've had with many of the manufacturers across the province is when we think about battery manufacturing processes in general, by and large, they're a chemical plant. Okay, there's a ton of chemicals that go into these things. Got to make sure we have proper controls, good hazard identification, these types of things. Okay, now I don't think this goes without saying, or it would be a surprise for most of you, is especially with my background, I know a few of you have worked with at your work sites, is the control of hazardous energy. Very important. Okay, there's high voltage components, obviously related to battery electric vehicles. We got to make sure that we understand how to control these hazardous energy prior to working on these pieces of equipment consistent with our laws. Okay, charging practices. Yes, batteries are very, very sensitive. We have to make sure that we are following good charging practices, following the manufacturer's requirements, installation, these types of things. So we will talk about that. Material handling, yes, it presents some challenges in terms of material handling. Obviously, batteries are heavy. The example I'll use, think about if you drive an EV, you get into let's say your car gets into a collision where you need to get some battery repair or some auto body repair, sorry. Well, during that process, there's times where the battery may have to be removed from the vehicle to be able to complete this. We have to think about the systems in place to ensure that we can manually or mechanically handle these batteries safely. And then finally, storage. Okay, so we'll spend some time on each of these for pretty much the duration of the main content today. Okay, so our first little bucket here is thermal runaway. Okay, I'm going to be honest with you, this is probably one of the most common concerns across the supply chain, okay? So what thermal runaway is, it's an uncontrolled, self-sustaining chain reaction where increased temperature causes further temperature increases, often leading to destructive result like a fire or explosion, okay? So just think about it from this standpoint. An EV gets into an accident, maybe it pierced, damaged the battery, these types of things. What we'll talk about the signs and symptoms in a couple slides here, but basically this is like the fire that's happening. Okay, we define those as thermal events. Okay, now with that, and probably one of the biggest challenges with thermal events is sometimes it may take minutes to days for an event to occur. Okay, so for example, I was talking to a industrial group that does oversee the collision group in Ontario. And one thing that they've talked to their working groups about is that many of them have implemented a safe storage location. When an EV comes in that they have to repair, it sits out in the yard for X amount of time before they'll bring it in. Why? They want to make sure there's not a thermal event, right? Because the problem is the toxins, the byproducts that come off of an electric battery vehicle is very toxic. Okay. So, and that's just based on the chemical properties required. Now, generally speaking, like when we think about EVs in terms of thermal events, they're probably not as high as we think in terms of on the roads. Obviously, if they're like getting into a car accident, these types of things are one thing. But in terms of just spontaneous reaction, we'll talk about kind of what causes thermal events on the next slide. So obviously maintaining your vehicle in good working condition, your equipment, these types of things are very important. However, probably one of the biggest challenges that I will say is a lot of times a thermal event will be happening before you'll be able to see it. Okay, so we're going to talk about the signs and symptoms here in a couple slides, and we'll talk about some of the things you might smell that will give you an indication, or you might hear that'll give you an indication that a thermal event may happen before you can see it. Okay, so let's talk about the causes here. Okay, mechanical abuse. We think about your cell phones, you think about your any battery. Okay, if a battery gets into a crush collision, it's penetrated, it gets dropped, thrown around, these types of things, inappropriate contact, this can be a major cause of a thermal event. Okay, sometimes what we end up seeing is these events causing things such as shorts and whatnot as part of the battery, and it causes that thermal runaway event. Okay, now other issues that we've seen is electrical abuse, so internal short within the circuit. Sometimes that really does pair, can be from the manufacturing faults, manufacturing process. Obviously, overcharging and discharging can create some issues in terms of the battery. Okay. Battery overheating. Okay, so the battery management system that we talked about earlier becomes it malfunctions, does not allow the battery to be able to sustain an appropriate temperature, could lead to a thermal runaway event. Okay. One of the biggest things we're seeing out in the field after an EV, computer, what have you, leaves the manufacturer are individuals making modifications to the vehicle, the battery management system, that in turn does create a thermal runaway event. So one thing just to think about, important that we understand the manufacturer's requirements, we understand the manufacturer specifications so that we're not modifying anything outside of what came from the factory without approved, I guess, modifications, right? Just because, again, these can create some problems. So we'll talk about that here in a few slides, as well as manufacturing faults, okay? Sometimes there's issues that come. I'm sure many of you, like one of my buddies just bought a brand new pickup, 5,000 kilometers, the engine blew on it, okay? And sometimes you get a lemon. But at the end of the day, there can be other issues. I know commonly what we've seen is inappropriate welds on the frame that have caused issues, like the battery tray, like repairing battery trays, for an example, that has caused issues to the battery, causing thermal runaway. Okay, so just to move forward here, what are some early signs to identify a thermal event? Okay, so in terms of smell, you'll smell a sweet electrical burning odor. Okay, so if you can't see anything, you don't hear anything, but you walk up and you smell these, very good idea to think about potentially a thermal event's happening. And like folks, as we review these, like one critical point is probably not a bad idea to think about, and we're going to talk about the emergency response items on the next slide. But just think about these in terms of your workplace and workers affected, right? Are workers able to, or have they been trained on the signs and symptoms of a thermal runaway event? That's one thing. The next thing is, do we have the processes in place to properly respond? Okay, so we're going to talk about that as well in the next couple slides, but definitely something to think about. Okay, back to the slide here. So what might you see? You might see a fire. You might see leaks and leaking fluid from the battery itself. Gas and white smoke. So a lot of times with thermal vents, you see this very bright white smoke coming from the battery. Arcing or arc flash, discoloration in the battery. Okay, these are all signs that you might see. In terms of noises that you might hear, abnormal noises such as popping, banging, hissing, buzzing. Okay, these are all good signs and symptoms to make sure that workers are aware of. Okay. Now, the next slide, as we kind of alluded to, is once we've identified the potential for a thermal event, it's important we think about what does our response planning look like, okay? So one thing that we do encourage folks to consider is working with their local fire department as a resource in terms of emergency response planning. Many of you probably fall within the headcount that would require a fire safety action plan. Not a bad idea when you get this reviewed by the fire department or your local prevention officer to think about and inquire about, hey, what are some items that we should be thinking about in terms of protecting against a thermal runaway event and some of the response planning required for that, okay? Because really that goes on to the next point, thinking about having fixed and portable emergency response equipment available, okay? Appropriate PPE, yes. Generally speaking, we do see many work areas that do interact with lithium-ion batteries require things such as respirators, these types of things. This is where doing some air quality, understanding the hazards that workers are exposed to can be vital in understanding what our appropriate response plan must be. Okay. Now, one of the points that we will cover towards the end of the presentation and that will be a part of the follow-up email is right now on the US side of things, the Department of Transportation, they do have a website that does contain a single source to find all the OEMs emergency response guides by make and model. Okay, so the nice thing is many of the OEMs are providing information related to emergency response planning. I'll drop the link in the chat right now, just so you have it. But we will be sending this as part of the follow-up email that will be coming. Okay. Great information in there how to respond to the battery. Now, obviously, this is specific to vehicles and the cars. However, there may be some good precedents. There might be some good precedents for you to think about, okay, as it relates to some other lithium-ion battery applications in your workplace, okay? Training and awareness, okay? So very important for us to consider how we are managing and response planning. One vital thing that most workplaces do a very good job of is ensuring that they do things such as emergency response drills, okay, or fire drills. Think about that as it relates to thermal events. Now, what I have found some of the most, I would say, structured workplaces I've been to across the province, what they've been doing in the conversations we've had in the prep for this is some of them have taken a very risk-based methodology, zoning out their workplace based on, hey, this is a red zone, meaning high risk of a thermal runaway event, yellow zone, green zone, and designing their emergency response planning based on that. Okay, so we are going to come back to that a little bit here. Okay. And we'll talk about some additional planning here in a moment. Okay. Typical. So what is recommended? Give me 1 second here. I do have notes from a fireman. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. So the different types. So water in general, Mallory, is one of the main ones. Okay. Cell block has basically like a type of fire blanket that's designed for EV batteries as well. Class D generally is what we would recommend in this, just because it absorbs heat and smothers metal fires. Okay. There are some people that, I mean, some other applications came up. I mean, we don't recommend CO2, but at the end of the day, those are kind of the main things. So, Class D, dry powder. Um, if you want to go the water side of things, or cell block as a blanket. Cell block's a brand, okay. But this is one thing I would also confirm with your fire department as well. Okay, I did get this information from a fireman from Toronto, but nonetheless, I hope that answers your question. Okay. Yep. Thank you. You're welcome. So, couple of things though that I think is very imperative. If you do see a thermal event, workers need to be aware to stay away. Like I was talking about earlier, the toxins that come off of a EV battery can be very harmful. Okay. So, and it does require some additional PPE, right? You should be wearing a respirator, these types of things. So we do recommend strongly that you don't go near it. Now, like obviously, like as part of your emergency response planning, this is definitely a consideration that we have to think about, right? If we have to start fit testing individuals for proper respirators, these types of things, definitely we got to include that in emergency response planning. If you need help in terms of type of respirator, these types of things, like awesome thing about WSPS is we have a bunch of industrial hygienists that work here, and I can definitely pass you off to one of those folks to give you the best answer. Okay. And obviously evacuate the area, call 911. Okay. They've been getting some additional training. I was actually just talking to one of my best friends who's a full-time firefighter about this, and they've been getting some additional training just because of the prevalence that is happening. Now, one thing I have noticed in some conversations with some manufacturers across the province is they have thought about on the front end, because of the lack of ability to sometimes be able to see a thermal event before it's actually starting. They've considered things such as thermal imaging cameras or gas monitors to detect early signs of thermal runaway. Okay. There's a couple mechanic shops I talked to where they put in these gas monitors. Like think about like similar to like people having carbon monoxide in kitchens and in automotive shops, putting in some gas monitors specific to monitoring obviously byproducts coming off of an EV battery, as well as I've talked to one major manufacturer where they've actually put thermal imaging cameras as part of their manufacturing process just to make sure they are monitoring it to ensure that their current controls that are protecting workers are adequate, right? Because at the end of the day, if there's a change, obviously as part of the manufacturing system, they want early detection so they can tell people to evacuate. Okay. Definitely something to think about. To dive in a little bit deeper, okay, what are some key points to emergency response planning? Okay, talked about this hazard assessment already. One standard that is out there, it's an SAE standard that talks about, basically does take a lithium ion battery approach in terms of risk mitigation, is this SAE J3235. It's a great standard if you're looking for guidance on how to properly assess hazards. It goes through common risks and mitigation strategies. It does really focus on the risks associated with the process. So the full, I know I just put in like the copy there. This standard is actually called best practice for the storage of lithium ion batteries. Okay. Now the standard is not free, but definitely something to think about. Okay. Some of the major manufacturers I've talked to, this has been kind of their reference point. Okay. After we've conducted a thorough hazard assessment and we understand where our risks are as part of your workplace, it's important that we establish an emergency response team, okay, or emergency response process bare minimum, so we know what to do. Okay, your process might be, hey, we evacuate, call a fire department, these types of things, but nonetheless, having an appropriate emergency response team, whether that's getting fitted for respirators and appropriate distinguishing techniques, these types of things, very important to think about. Okay, with that also comes training and education. So for me, I do like doing things such as fire drills, these types of things. But during your education training, and I'm going to jump down to this last point and I'll come back to these ones, is that I think it's very important that we think about after a fire drill and the lessons learned and what we can do better. Okay. And obviously reviewing the program and maintaining it. Eva, I did briefly talk about that. I don't know if you caught the fire extinguisher. I will just come back to revisit that. So water is generally one area that has been used pretty successfully. Cell Block does have like a fire blanket for EVs that go over top. Okay. Cell Block is the brand. Now here at WSPS, obviously we can't recommend one over the other. There might be other brands out there. This is just one that I know has been used, okay, with some success. The problem is, I will say, and it's not a part of this presentation, but it's a good actually point to like a part of this conversation, folks, is that there's a lot of companies that are marketing like fire extinguisher stuff or fire suppression equipment that they claim is to a standard that's not, okay, or hasn't been tested. So we just got to just be careful on that side. Class D, okay, D for dry powder, okay, has been like the most common, okay. We don't recommend using CO2, insufficient cooling, okay. Foams, okay. AFFF/A3. So it's just what I got notes from my friend there was it's got limited penetration. Okay. But yeah, these are all great questions. Okay. Also, even what I did say to Mallory, also consult with your local fire department as they might have more up-to-date information than we've gotten. Okay. Back to the slide here. So ensuring that we are establishing escalation and communication protocol. Okay. We have a thermal runaway event. Who gets notified? Within your workplace. What I strongly recommend to folks, and I've in my previous life, we standardized this approach across all our facilities, was we had one escalation process for everything in our building, whether it was Ministry of Labor, whether it was quality, whether it was an environmental spill, whether it was a fire, right? And basically we had one grid that had the positions on the side. And it said, okay, if this event happens, these people need to be contacted. If this event happens, these people need to be contacted. Make it simple. Okay. It's just one of the more important things is we got to establish an escalation and communication protocol. Okay. We spent quite a bit of time, obviously, on the fire suppression system and equipment. Okay. Housekeeping and maintenance, developing evacuation and emergency procedures. Okay. So on and so forth. Now, what we are going to do is I'm going to pull up the next poll. Okay. And it is this one. So a sweet electrical burning odor can be early detection sign of a thermal runaway event. Is that true or false? Give you a few moments here. Do you see 4 people saying yes right off the hop? Love it. Awesome. We're going to close that poll because you guys did great on that. That is true. Awesome. So on your end, you just got to make sure you click the top right corner. Okay. Let's move on to chemicals. Okay. So as we've talked about, chemicals, electrolytes within the lithium ion batteries may vary between manufacturers. I will say this has probably been one of the most common concerns I have noticed in our conversations is there's not a lot of consistency in terms of the battery makeup, these types of things. Now, that's created challenges. I'll shoot you straight on it, right? And the reason a little bit of it does feel like we're at a little bit of a space race right now in terms of technology around lithium ion batteries, right? So there is that competitive edge. People are trying to keep things very proprietary. However, this is where understanding the manufacturer's manual, making sure that we get the SDS sheets, we understand what chemicals are being used to help understand our testing strategy, our controls, our assessment of the hazard are very vital. Okay. Now, on the chemical side, it may be corrosive and flammable. Yes, a lot of these products that go into lithium ion batteries are extremely flammable. So we have to watch our storage practices. We will talk about that here in a few slides. And then at times when exposed to water, it may produce hydrofluoric acid. Okay. Now, I've been teeing this up a little bit in the chemical release during a thermal event. You have asphyxiating gases, irritants, heavy metal, nanoparticles, fires, explosions, very heavy stuff, okay, that we have to make sure that we think about. We have the proper controls in place, okay? Now, with that, and kind of the key point, okay, the key point is that I've really, when I've talked to suppliers, talked to organizations across the province, is independent of the location within the supply chain, having safe storage and handling practices is vital. Okay, on unintentional chemical release. So the manufacturer generally, there's some good information as part of the manual that does talk about how to safely handle these things. It also goes through storage procedures in terms of whether it's the temperature wise, how they need to be stored, these types of things. Okay. To me, this is very important. Okay. I feel like in a lot of conversations I've had with employers, and we're going to talk about this here in a moment, is we're missing the gap between what the current legislation does say versus lithium ion batteries, right? There's kind of a little bit of a I don't want to say misconception, but a little bit of lack of being able to link how our current legislation applies. So for example, I'm going to go through this second point. I'm going to read the second point on the slide first, and I'm going to explain this. Okay, so within the BEV manufacturing sector, understanding locations and type of chemical exposures throughout the manufacturing process is essential in selecting appropriate controls and designing adequate ventilation systems. Okay, so this is what I mean by current legislation where people might not understand. So we know in the province of Ontario, if I'm designing ventilation for the purposes of control of exposure of a chemical, a hazardous level of a chemical in Regulation 833 in a factory, to be clear, so you're part of the manufacturing process, a pre-start review is required, okay, for ventilation systems. So in talking to many manufacturers across the province, we'll go in talking about specifically on the machine safety side, and they've missed the boat a little bit on, hey, I put ventilation in for the protection of our people so they don't have to wear respirators, but they never got it professional engineered, designed, or reviewed, okay, which is a legal requirement. This would apply. It's independent of it being a battery electric vehicle. This is just a general requirement if I'm using ventilation systems for hazardous levels of controls for your workers. Okay, we're going to talk about the legislation that directly or indirectly applies here in a few slides, but just it's a good example of how we need to also think about the controls we have in our workplace and our legal responsibilities under the Act. Okay, getting into hazardous energy control. Okay, so you're going to see a lot of references throughout this presentation. You've already seen a lot on ensuring you know your OEM requirements for controlling hazardous energy. Okay, many of the manufacturers, as part of their manuals, do have steps for how to control the energy related to the battery, as well as procedures for taking the battery in and out during things such as auto body repair, collision repair, these types of things. Okay, now these manuals, this information that's provided in the manual, and that goes for your computer, your cell phone, these types of things, okay, is there should be good information there that should be a little bit of guidance in terms of developing safe work procedures. We're also going to send out an email with some great resources that can help you develop these things as well. When we think about individuals that may have to be exposed to the high voltage situations with batteries, okay, you have a bigger battery, these types of things, got to make sure adequate PPE is available in the workplace. Things such as high voltage gloves, safety glasses and shield, arc flash clothing, insulation mats, blankets, safety boots, appropriate high voltage multimeter, okay? Very basic stuff right now, folks, but definitely something to think about. A little bit of homework if you have these in the workplace. Definitely, I'd go look at the manual. Okay. Now, one thing that we get quite a bit questions on is the charging side of things, and it has came up in some situations. I'll just say this is due to ESA, so Electrical Safety Authority in the province of Ontario, and the mandatory certification. So we got to use CSA, UL related products. Canada does see a lot fewer charging related fires compared to internationally. A part of that is there's a lot of jurisdictions that don't require that oversight. So what we're talking about here is when you do certain electrical installations, there is a requirement to have ESA come in and put a yellow orange sticker on the panel to make sure that they're certifying that the power coming into the building is okay to be connected to machines, cars, these types of things. Okay. So with that, if you install an EV charger, ESA would generally be involved to ensure that it was installed properly. Okay. Now, where have we seen causes of hazards? Okay, related to charging. Okay, people buying uncertified chargers bought online. Okay, so again, aftermarket, third party, they might not be designed to CSA components, these types of things, creating some issues in terms of charging. Okay, and just remember this, folks. It's like, especially if you have an electric battery, like a vehicle, right? Whether it's a forklift, your AGV, these types of things, vehicles. Okay, there's a large cost associated with obviously having these things, right? In terms of like it's an investment, like it's a car, right? If I go out and spend whatever 50, 60 plus thousand on an electric vehicle, I'm gonna want to make sure that I follow the manufacturer's requirements so that number one, I don't have a fire in the immediate, but number two, so that I have the longevity related to that battery. The problem is when we're not charging them properly, what can happen in turn is that you're damaging the battery, you're going to lose your range, these types of things as well. So there's also a big picture element. Okay. Other points here, improper installations, overloading the circuits, especially in older homes. So again, you might not have the electricity coming in to support it. Okay. Damage, not maintained equipment. So good idea as part of your workplace, if you do have EV chargers, maybe include on a monthly inspection, a PM, these types of things to make sure that there's no damage to the chargers and it's locked out if there's an issue. Okay. So some additional charging recommendations. Okay. I'm going to go through this on the next couple slides here. So obviously we want to make sure we're using manufacturer approved chargers and following the recommendations. Avoid counterfeit, off-brand, charging at room temperature. I know this, I know I'm like kind of beating a dead horse a bit with this one, but like I was just talking to someone not that long ago that they bought an EV charger off Temu and they're asking me, do you think this is good? I'm like, well, let's see the standards it was made to. None of it, right? So at the end of the day, they're increasing their risk, obviously, of a fire, damaging their battery, and I don't know how insurance would think about that as well. So that's also a consideration. Okay. Want to make sure we charge on hard, stable surfaces. So think about like if you're charging like batteries, like even like a smaller unit, right? Whether it's like your laptop, these types of things. You don't want to avoid charging on bed, couches, or other soft surfaces as that could damage the battery as well as create overheating. Could lead to a fire. Never cover batteries when charging. Okay. Pretty consistent across all manufacturers that we don't do those two things. Okay. Avoiding overcharging and unattended chargers. Okay. So when we're done charging, try to disconnect where you can. Avoid leaving chargers unattended. One item that has came up quite a bit that we've noticed is just locations of chargers. Okay. So a couple weeks ago, excuse me, I was in a manufacturing facility. And the only place that they could find area to charge their lift trucks, their battery-operated lift trucks, was close to an emergency exit. Okay, now they're obstructing their exit to be able to charge their batteries. Okay. Review manufacturers' emergency response guides and ensure adequate equipment. Okay, we've talked about that. So, Nadine, a lot of companies are greening their fleet, so charging stations are now being built everywhere. Are there recommendations from a design standpoint, including recommendations for how to build in an area or location of emergency response items? Okay. No, like nothing's been amended as per the fire code at this point. Now, truthfully, in some of the conversations I've had with the ministry, they are in the process of setting up the safety action plan where they're going to be reviewing the types of guidance information that is provided. Okay. However, again, this kind of goes back to your normal building code stuff. Okay. And fire code items, regardless of source of a fire, the fire code does talk about ensuring you have emergency response equipment in close proximity. Obviously, from a design standpoint, we'll always default back to the manufacturer's guidance on the type of chargers, location of chargers, these types of things. To finally answer your question, there's a little bit of detail on charging considerations in a document that will be provided, Nadine. So I will come back to that when it comes up. But essentially, well, I'll scroll forward to show you what it is. There's a little bit of information here, okay, on the storage, transportation, okay, high voltage batteries, handling, okay. There's some good information here, as well as in this document. So you will get an email with these documents after the session, okay. So just hang tight. One thing that we are working on, like I said, in conjunction with the ministry, is seeing how we can help support this. Because there's not a lot of standard information out right now specific to EVs. But like I said, we got to follow our normal fire code. Okay. Next poll. Okay. So potential sources of hazards related to EV charging includes uncertified chargers bought online, improper installation, including without licensed electricians, overloaded circuits, particularly in older homes, damage, not maintained equipment, or all the above. Give you a few moments here. Awesome. Love the participation today, guys. I'm going to close the poll on my end. Okay. The answer is all the above. Great job. 100%. Okay. Getting into material handling. Okay. So lithium ion batteries presents a lot of challenges. Okay. They're very heavy. Obviously, batteries are very heavy, especially think about lift trucks, these types of things. Very sensitive to environmental conditions. Okay. So like I was talking to someone the other day, they said they were working on a vehicle, and for that the manufacturer's recommendations, if you're doing any auto body work, the manufacturer recommends that the battery comes out. Okay. So one of the challenges that they've came across is that obviously got to make sure we have the appropriate equipment to be able to hoist these things in and out. And then after that, have safe areas to store the battery. Now we're getting into battery storage on the next couple slides. But these are all considerations, right? Lift tables, carts, hoists, conveyors, robotics, cranes, automation may ease the manual burden, okay? Now, having said that, it's important that we train the workers on the safe handling precautions provided by the manufacturer. It's provided probably also as part of the SDS sheets, also as part of the manuals. I will say that different manufacturers have different lift points on part of their batteries. So definitely something to think about, making sure workers are trained to this, where to find that information, these types of things. And then finally, just that crush point hazard on the material handling. So gotta make sure, and this goes without saying, this isn't exclusive to EVs, this is for every vehicle, have to make sure they are secured to prevent unintended movement while completing maintenance, okay? So again, that is directly from Regulation 851. Got to make sure whether it's chalk, braking, these types of things to make sure that the vehicle is not going to move as we're working on it. Okay, it's safely secured. Now, getting into battery storage recommendations. Okay, so just the key point, kind of blanket statement. We always say again, go back to the manufacturer's recommendations. However, some key points that generally apply to all lithium-ion batteries is store in a cool, dry, well-vented areas. Okay, store away from flammable materials. Goes without saying, lithium-ion batteries very flammable. We don't want that risk of having a fire. Okay. We've talked about the fire suppression system, smoke detectors, these types of things to maybe monitor the area where you are storing these. Okay. Utilize packaging structures, spatial segregation to contain batteries and limit spread of fire. So what we mean by this is we've seen workplaces put in like partitions, okay? Limit how many batteries are stored in one area so that if there is a thermal event, they can contain it within zones. Okay, that's more or less what we're talking about here. Might be a challenge for different workplaces, obviously, but think about how we can maybe use different areas of your workplace, even outside, following obviously the manufacturer's requirements to help minimize worker exposure if there is a thermal event. Okay, moving forward here. So reducing the state of charge. So yes, one practice that we do see is that many times, especially in the manufacturing process, they may minimize the amount of energy in the battery during storage just so that they minimize the magnitude of a thermal event. Okay, store batteries with appropriate spacing and limit heights to minimize fire load. Okay, this is a good conversation to have with your chief prevention officer, for your fire department, these types of individuals. Okay. Inspecting for accidental electrolyte leakage. If we see any leakage on the floor, good indication that maybe there's a potential thermal event or a fault in the manufacturing process or an issue with the vehicle, the product that's at your workplace. Good idea to think about it from that standpoint and inspect these areas. Now, we do have a note here. We have to make sure that we do dispose of the product following our local regulations. We've got to make sure we are in conjunction with our requirements under the Ministry of Environment, controlling water runoff. Okay, if you are in a situation that may present that hazard. Okay, so and also finally the use of lithium-ion battery storage cabinets. So we have seen workplaces use use these different types of battery storage systems. So let me see here. So I'm going to put in an example. So again, referencing Cell Block again. Again, we do not have any relation to this organization. Cannot recommend one or the other. Just using this as an example of here's some lithium-ion battery storage cabinets. Okay, seeing individuals in the workplace kind of use these for things such as their flammables, these types of things. This is also the company that did have the fire blankets that. Again, I did talk to an individual that did test it, and they said that it did hold up to what the manufacturers was saying it did. Okay, so just be careful on that side. Now, a few slides ago, or about half an hour ago, I guess I should be saying, we did say that we're going to come back to the legislation that applies. Okay, so just to be transparent, there's no special legislation that has been amended at this point specific to lithium-ion batteries. Now, having said that, despite there being very limited direct references, the general duties of the workplace parties always apply. Okay, so for example, Section 25(1)(b), equipment, materials, and protective devices provided by the employer maintained in good working condition. So battery systems, manufacturing equipment, emergency response equipment, lifting devices, material handling, etc., like used throughout the supply chain, must be inspected and maintained to prevent failures. Okay, goes without saying. 25(2)(a), it is the employer's legal responsibility to provide information, instruction, supervision to a worker. So again, providing safe work instructions to me is very vital. This may include, but not limited to, standard operating procedures for tasks, reviewing OEM manuals, training, competent supervision, etc. Okay. The next point really is very similar. So acquaint a worker or a person in authority over a worker with any hazard in the work, in the handling and the storage of the use, disposal, and transport of any chemical or physical agent. As we mentioned, batteries are very chemical-based products. So again, reviewing the training and critical information within the safety data sheet, such as safe handling, storage of the chemical used, PPE requirements, as well as systems in place to meet these requirements are very important. Okay. Just 25(2)(h), a general duty clause. So this is where we've grouped in things such as providing safe storage, PPE, emergency management equipment protocols when using lithium-ion batteries in the workplace. Again, just under the Act, under Section 37(3), again, it is the employer's responsibility to ensure that they are training workers to the SDS sheets and critical information. And then finally, this is the reference I was talking about earlier, related to controlling occupational exposure limits or occupational exposure hazards for workers, okay, that are exposed to that hazard. Okay, so again, it requires employers to take all reasonable measures to protect workers from exposure to a hazardous chemical. Okay, so when this comes up and you have chemicals that are a part of this table and we're unsure how much a worker is exposed to, that does drive assessment, okay, to ensure what are workers exposed to. From there, your assessment will be able to determine, are we above the occupational exposure limit? Are we below it? And then from there, we need to put in controls if we're above it, right? So definitely something to think about. Now, honestly, we're just scratching the surface here with some of these points of the current legislation. Obviously, WHMIS applies to chemicals, all workplace hazardous materials in the workplace. Okay. Industrial establishment has a bunch of obviously information on the industrial hygiene section under PPE, as well as we talked about maybe in and around the pre-start requirements and around adequate ventilation. So I would really encourage you to specifically look at Regulation 851, as well as there's a lot of general stuff that is covered throughout, whether it's the building section or the industrial hygiene section, part 2 and part 3 of Regulation 851. Okay. Having said that, this situation is very fluid. Like I said, the ministry, we're going to talk about their next steps here in about 3-4 slides, and talk about what the focus area is right now. But having said that, what we will do is I'm going to launch the next polls. Give me 1 second. I clicked on my screen and I lost where they were. So give me 1 moment. So all EV lithium-ion battery safe handling and storage requirements are the same. Is that true or false? What do you think? Yeah, all of you said false. I agree. Got to make sure we check the manual. I have found though, like the other side of it too, is there's been some frustrations with the information that was provided in the lack of consistency. I know there's a big push right now through the Society of Automotive Engineers to help, at least on the standards that apply to transportation in the workplace, well, in general, to make sure that there's some more standardized guidance provided. These are all recommendations that we are consulting with, I guess, to support the ministry's next steps. We'll come back to that here in a moment. Okay. Now, it is 11:30. We got a few more slides to get through, more or less just resources, next steps, these types of things. Okay. So the very last module, next steps, resources, and session wrap up. Okay. So we do have a couple of resources that we developed earlier last year. Angela Cameron, Sean McCormick were working on it. And one of the things that they did is similar to what we've been currently doing is went out, reached out to the different Ontario employers to understand what the challenge is, what's the information, what are the next steps that they see. Okay. So during that review, through featuring subject matter experts, what they found the need for is resources to support Ontario employers in understanding and complying with provincial legislation, ensuring that there is increased level of training for BEV and hybrid vehicle training standards for automotive service technicians, updating CSA standards to include applications to battery electric vehicle. Interestingly enough, I was talking to one of the founding members of CSA 462 in the last couple weeks, and this individual had told me that they're in the process of actually adding in an annex related to electric vehicles. CSA 462 is the workplace electrical safety standard in Ontario, separate from the electrical code, but workplace electrical safety, kind of controlling the hazards related to electrical sources in the workplace. So they are actually looking at updating that information as we speak. That standard is set to come out, I believe, in the next 12 to 18 months. Requirement for individuals providing training, right? Got to make sure that there's consistency. One of the biggest challenges that we have found is there's very lack of standardization of training amongst OEMs. And the other side of it too is there's a lot of individuals marketing, training, and information that may not be shouldn't maybe not be the ones that should be delivering it, right? I would say on the OEM side, again, it kind of goes back to one of the common themes that, and this is a Josh opinion side of things, is that because of the proprietary information related to their vehicles and the lack of standardization amongst OEMs, it is driving a lot of individualized training programs with a lack of consistency, obviously, because of they're all designing their batteries in their own way kind of thing. So it is presenting its own challenges. That's definitely something that does really bleed into the next slide here and the Working for Worker 6. Okay, so in conjunction with obviously everything that we've talked about today, and I'm going to put the actual news report in the chat for you, is that the ministry, when they signed Working for Worker 6 November 27th of last year, so we're at 1 year, they had a line item in there that said, and I quote, prevent injuries and illnesses for auto workers by developing an occupational health and safety action plan led by the chief prevention officer in partnership with the auto sectors to address the growing use of lithium-ion batteries within the sector. Okay, so what are the three main focus areas and some of the conversations we've had? Develop training and protocols for a safe lithium-ion battery life cycle, doing some research to understand the hazards and controls, advancing standards within the space. Okay, so as of right now, the last update I got from the ministry was the ministry had to submit their draft of their safety action plan to the chief prevention officer in October. We're still waiting for kind of the next steps from that, but WSPS will be helping support these initiatives as we get more clarity. From that, back to the slide that I did just show, is our goal will be to help provide training, resources, consultation to help strengthen this area, because I'm going to be honest with you, a little bit of being a consultant right now, I find in talking with the various businesses across the province, there's a lot of the blind leading the blind in this area. Okay, so that's where, for me, I like that SAE 3235 standard just from the standpoint as it does give you a structured risk-based methodology to help assess these areas. I find that, and this is probably the machine robotics Josh coming out of me, is that when we don't have it's not even that. I guess just up front with any safety hazard in the workplace, we have to understand what is our hazards, what are our controls to mitigate the risk. Having a structured approach to be able to help identify these hazards, referencing applicable standards to me help to provide a good framework for how to successfully do this. Okay. Now, to wrap up the session here, okay, the next two slides, gonna cover some resources that you're gonna get in an email at some point this week. Okay. So the follow-up email is going to include the WSPS is two main documents related to EV safety. So we have that plugged into safety white paper that goes through some good information on the current landscape, some of the hazards, some of the controls, next steps. Okay. There's a lot of SMEs in there that do have from various employers across the province, putting in some very good insight. Okay. The next one I would say here is the electric vehicle safety hazard checklist. Yes, we do have a checklist on our website that does help provide good information in and around electric vehicle safety, good like high level hazard assessment. Here's the hazard. Is it present in your workplace? Here's the references, list of possible controls. So it's a good starting point to assess some of the hazards in your workplace. Now, one other one that I am going to send in the chat, here's a 10-minute video that WSPS also has made. I don't know if this is, I can't remember if this is a part of the email that's going out, so I want to make sure I include it. I think it is. And I believe e-course. Right now, there's a number of free courses we have on our website that's running. We just announced it actually last week, kind of as a Black Friday event from now until next year, where a number of our e-courses online that we would traditionally charge for are free, including this EV Battery Health and Safety Essentials e-course. This one is about 2 hours long, but it is free right now. So take the opportunity to watch it, take the opportunity to get engaged. There's also other ones like we have our lockout e-course, workplace violence and harassment e-course. All these are free right now, so take advantage of it. Okay. The very last content slide, okay, is the external resources, okay? Each and every single one of these will be a part of the email that goes out. Just to kind of review this, so Call to Recycle is our provincially partnered organization that is helping with the end of life items related to lithium ion batteries. Okay. I will say we did not cover that in terms of this presentation. I would say that the transportation of dangerous goods and classifications of battery electric vehicles, specifically the ones that have to cross into the United States, have a lot of requirements. Okay. The first document up top here is the safe handling and storage. Provides some nice details on safe handling and storage considerations related to lithium ion batteries. This second document is for the ones that might have to ship, collect, or transport lithium ion batteries. There's some nice information there. Okay. Now, one thing is in the United States, the Automotive Retailers Association partnered with Workplace BC to create a very nice guideline that talks about safe work practicing for handling, dismantling, storage, and transportation of electric batteries and high voltage batteries. Okay, great document. It does provide some very nice details, considerations, best practices for you to consider for your workplace. My only caveat I will say to this document is the references in terms of legislation are for WorkSafe BC. Sorry. Our legislation in the areas that are referenced are very similar. So it's not to say like there's a lot of the common themes that are listed in terms of from a legal standpoint. A lot of them are the exact same in Ontario, or very similar in Ontario. But nonetheless, just that's the only caveat is the legislation wouldn't necessarily directly apply. So just something to think about. But it's a great document. Okay. Ovin, again, another Ontario partner. They do have a ton of great EV information and training modules, okay, on their website. Some of these there are some for free. There's some that do come at a cost. Great training modules, especially for individuals that are like technicians that got to work on electric battery vehicles, these types of things. And then finally, I already sent this. So the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration does have all of the make and model emergency response guides on a single source on their website. On our Ontario website, so like Call to Recycle for an example, and I believe even Ovin have links back to this website to encourage people to use this. Makes it easy, especially if you have a situation where you have multiple manufacturers on site to help understand the emergency response procedures. I would say up front, if you're something where you have high volume, you see a lot of the same items, it's important that we take the time, we train our folks where to find the information, ensuring that we have the adequate tools that's required to meet the OEM response. Okay. So to wrap up, again, we are here to help. I'm going to drop my email in the chat. It'll also be as part of the email that goes out tomorrow. If you ever have any questions, okay, you're looking for consulting, maybe there's some training. We have a great program also with the WSIB for the Health and Safety Excellence Program. We are here to help you in many different facets. A lot of what we have on this slide here is free. If you email me looking for help on something, I had someone yesterday call me. We got on a call. They're looking for some guarding support. So they said, hey, here's some photos. This is how the machine works. Is this guard okay? We went through the standards that apply. Okay. That's all free. Okay. We also have a ton of free resources on our website. Like I said, take advantage of some of our free training that's going on right now, as well as obviously we have a number of different training programs for fee for service. And then obviously one item that we do really, really, really proudly support is the WSIB Excellence Program in the province. So essentially the skinny of that one is you register through us being a system provider, and essentially you get a rebate for every health and safety a rebate on your WSIB premiums for every health and safety program that you successfully implement following the guidance of the WSIB's requirements. And here at WSPS, we're here to help you ensure that you meet those and provide you some consultation, give you templates, procedures, resources for every single topic that is on their list to make it as easy as possible for you. Okay. So with that, that is the end of today's safety connection. Jim and I do appreciate everyone taking the time today to attend today's session. Before we drop off, does anyone have any questions before I let you go on this beautiful December 3rd day? Please use the meeting chat. All right. Well, with that, we appreciate you taking the time. Have a great, wonderful rest of your day. And on behalf of WSPS, we do thank you for attending today's Safety Connection. Please look for that email in the coming days. Okay. We much appreciate it. Have a safe and wonderful day, everyone. Thank you.